Thousand Words podcast. Join us as we discuss the antics of pro athletes, sports politics, and everything in between. No sport nor athlete is off limits. Now, get you a pitcher of wine and enjoy the show. Here are your hosts, Lene and Linnell Fletcher, aka the Fletcher Twins. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of A Picture is Worth 1,000 Words. This your girl Nelly Nell. And this your girl Nay. What it do, boo? Okay, guys. So today we have a special guest in the building, former NBA player, now author and motivational speaker, Lance Allred.
Yeah, you said it right. No, sometimes people, it sounds like it looks, you know.
So it is nice to see you again, Lance. How have you been?
Oh, it's been good. We saw each other in Florida last month when I was there in Fort Lauderdale for the Florida Local Government Securities Association. Yeah, that was quite the an acronym they had. But yeah, I've been fine and just doing my thing.
Yeah, so we met at an IT conference. My husband, he works in IT, so he had to go there for his job. So I do want to give him a special shout out because he is the one. If it wasn't from him, I wouldn't have been there and met you. But he actually approached you, told you about the podcast. Yes. And then eventually I introduced myself, told you about the podcast. And I was just so excited because as soon as I mentioned it, you were like, yeah, I'll do it, like without a question. So I want to thank you, first of all, for joining us today.
Well, it's always helpful when there's a human connection. The fact that we actually met in person is like, okay, I mean, I can actually do that. I mean, there's something to be said for real face-to-face encounters that make it much easier to get on and do a podcast rather than someone you've never met. So it was great. I'm happy it worked out. I'm glad to be here.
Okay. Yep. So we're going to jump right into it. So we did purchase your book, Longshot, which, by the way, is a great read.
Oh, so my God.
It's so anyone who out there who wants to, it's a good read. I liked it. So we're just going to jump right into it.
Wait, first I have to tell him, because we're going to talk about his TED Talk later, but I have to tell him both the book and the TED Talk made me cry. They were so inspiring. So I just had to say that. It was, and I got my notes to ask you questions about the book too. So go ahead.
Honestly, I'm so glad. Honestly, a lot of people, they throw me on a podcast and they just kind of fill it out with the fact that you guys actually have read the book and things to talk about. I mean, I'm already excited we're doing this. So let's go.
Of course, of course.
So I just want to let people know out there that your upbringing was, I want to say, maybe outside the box from the normal or what society see as normal upbringing from birth. I know the book mentions that at birth there was some complications.
You were near death.
Correct. Yeah, and then later found out you were deaf.
Legally deaf
at 80% hearing. Yeah, so I was born and raised in a polygamous cult, and they didn't think about things like Rh incompatibility. My mother's a negative blood type. I'm a positive, so her body was killing me off as a parasite. It was an extreme polygamous group that we were living on the fringes, and we were expecting Jesus to come again at any time. So we weren't thinking about those kind of things. And so being in an incubator for 3 weeks after I was born, I had several blood changes. And so we're not sure if the nerves in my ears are never fully developed because of Rh, if they were damaged during the blood changes. But either way, that was the situation. And being born in rural Montana, there were no amenities to learn sign language. So I had to be thrown out of my comfort zone and made to wear hearing aids and be in speech therapy until I was 16.
That's what I was going to ask. That was one of my questions. Did you or your family ever learn sign language, or did you just get really good at?
Yeah,
he read lips.
Yeah,
lip reader
and body language. You mentioned that in the book. Body language is like universal.
Words can lie, but the body never lies.
Right. And I had a quick question because on page 7.
Mm-hmm.
First, I do want to ask, how was it growing up being the youngest and being like the one with condition? I guess, is that the right term for it?
How is it to be the youngest in the family, growing up in a situation like that? There definitely was a chip on the shoulder, as far as I think youngest siblings naturally have a chip on the shoulder to try to make their mark in a family. But then you combine that with the disability, or at least now the invisible disability of hearing loss that a lot of people can't tell because of the way I speak now.
Yeah.
Having your siblings and everyone doing their best to like speak really loud and make you feel comfortable, but sometimes you feel like people are talking to you like you're an idiot.
Yeah.
And so, but then you have other people around you who really do think you're an idiot because you can't hear well. And
That's
so
terrible.
just taking in all that, you definitely have a chip on your shoulder. And I don't have any regrets. That chip is what allowed me to get to the levels that I did in the world of basketball and now in the world of speaking. But we all know, we go through development stages that what got you someplace isn't going to get you someplace else. That is no longer serving me at this point to think that everyone's my competition. And you're learning to kind of just tone it down a bit with the intensity and understanding, hey, you know what, I've earned my right to be comfortable in my own skin at this point. But I'm now 41 years old, able to say that. And it took a long time to get there, but I'm grateful to be there now.
I Googled you, so I knew you were 41. We're going to get to that later, though. I have a lot of questions. I'm sorry.
I love it. That's great. I appreciate questions.
How is your relationship with your siblings now? Because I know in the book, and I don't want to give too much away, you and Tyra was like, it seemed like y'all didn't get along.
Yeah, no, she had the middle child syndrome, and
that's me. I do too.
You guys have that. But now I've definitely, you get to a place with the work I've done when I was recovering from suicidal depression back in 2009, after my dream in the NBA had died. I was playing over in Italy and they weren't paying, and I nearly ended it. And I had a choice in that moment to, again, I can die or I can let my stories die. Stories about what the world owes me, the victim archetype that we tell, that something bad happened to me, that we stay in that archetypal role. Storytelling is important, but who is telling the story? The child, or the teacher, or the victim inside of our psyches? And in that journey of really getting down deep into the thought patterns in my brain and the way I was perceiving the world, I really had to begin to rewire all that. And how I process information and how I internalize it, because so much of how we internalize is our cultural conditioning, our family patterns, and our geographical location. That all has effects on the way we mature as adults. And so I really began to have an effort in that process of saying, I no longer am going to be obsessed about when are people going to understand me. Instead, I'm going to do my best to understand them, without transactional emphasis that they need to reciprocate it back to me. It's simply, they are my sister, and I'm going to make the effort to understand her. And naturally, when you do that, the pressure lessens. Even if they're conscious or aren't understanding what you're doing, subconsciously, they're going to feel a lessening of the pressure. And so in my effort to better understand my sister, as I was making an effort to better understand myself, our relationship has definitely improved tremendously, better than I ever thought it was going to be.
That's good. That's good. And so one more question from the beginning of the book. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Page 7. I'm not going to say what the Sunday school teacher said, but it was rough for me to read. But do a lot of people think like that? Or that was just, you think, because of the time?
Worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
No, people still think like that.
That's a really good question. The world I was raised in, I mean, America has so many, it's a melting pot of cultures, but also like any place, the geographical terrain has an effect on the culture's identity too. And so when you come from pioneer ancestry, people who literally took handcarts thousands of miles across the plains up into the Rocky Mountains to find a place to practice their religious freedom, and had children and family members dying along the way, there was a definite stoicism, but also a ultra conservative, pull yourself up by the bootstraps type of mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no room for emotions. There's no room for your feelings in this kind of setting. So you learn to just clamp everything down and just endure to the end, because, there's blessings waiting for me on the other side.
Okay.
And so where I was raised and had the Sunday school teacher that tell me that God and every death is a form of punishment. One, you have a lot of the linear religious structuring of fundamentalist Mormonism, that everything is so formulaic, X plus Y equals Z. That if I get baptized and I go on a mission and I get married in a temple and all these other criteria, you can then go to heaven. But that creates a very left-brained world where everything is so linear, and the right brain is where our creative processes come. That's where grace and empathy and compassion come from. But in this world, it's very left-brained, and so in their logical fallacies, it's like, oh, okay, well, as what we were told, and I'm not sure if you know, but this is some of Mormonism's wacky history. I'm not religious anymore, but it was prophesied in the beginning by the founders, not Joseph Smith, but the man after him, Brigham Young, that Black people had dark skin because they sat on the fence in the Great Holy War in the pre-existence. So there's that undertone of racism. But with that, it's okay, well, we have to make sense of why everything looks the way it does. Again, left-brained, linear. Black people are different. Oh, now we know why. Oh, people with disabilities are different. Oh, now we know why. And people do that to have their comfort zones. And I learned at a very young age in that time, and especially after we broke away from polygamy, when my father blew the whistle on child abuse and money laundering, that religion for many people is mostly psychological. It has nothing to do with spirituality. It's them wanting to know that they're making the right choices, and they feel validated in those choices by having the world reflect back to them what they're comfortable with.
Okay.
That's true. Okay.
Oh, I wanted to mention. No, so since we were talking about your siblings, I wanted to mention two things in the book that I thought was pretty funny when you were younger, when you would actually purposely hide your hearing aids.
Oh yeah.
Because I think some people don't know, or they don't put themselves in another person's shoes. Like, you hearing for the first time could be very overwhelming, because you can hear every single thing, and it's like 100 times as loud. So I got why you hit them. I just thought it was really funny.
Yeah, people have to understand, even though my hearing may not have the right, there's these little follicles of hair inside the eardrum that look like musical notes. And those are the vibrational receptors that are able to differentiate between the notes and the scales. And even though a lot of those in my brain, my ear are gone, when you put a microphone into my ear and you blast it, my eardrum and my skull is still going to feel it. And so it's very, very uncomfortable. And so to this day, my sensory cup of hearing is still very small, that I can't wait to take my hearing aids out at the end of the day, because it's just a long day every day.
Yeah, I liked how you described in great detail how the sweat affects your hearing aid, because nobody would think of that unless they're experiencing it. So I like that. That was that was a good detail.
It's just little things like that's the job of a writer, of an author, is to give someone a little microscope into their world, not just my culture, but also what it's like to have those challenges and those disabilities. And I think any author who's worth their salt has to do that.
Okay, and the second thing that I thought was pretty funny with your siblings was when you ate your sister's chocolate like the night before, and then you made sure you ate yours, so she couldn't get it. I thought that was really funny. I laughed at that part.
It was Tara, the one we're talking about, the advent calendar. When my mom brought home an advent calendar for everyone, I made sure, on December 24th, she's not going to have a candy when she opens it up.
And you walked straight to the timeout chair, like I did it. Yeah.
I knew it was coming. I'm like, I'll take my seat.
So now I want to jump into the church and the polygamous society. So your granddad, Rulon Allred, he started the community, and he's kind of a big deal because I Googled him. Like, most people can't Google their granddad and see pages and pages. Mm-hmm. So I was like, wow, he's kind of a big deal. So what was it like? Because I don't get it. And I was talking to my sister earlier, because I feel like,
I don't agree with this, but just to throw that out there, because I don't know why she doesn't understand, but go ahead.
I don't get it. So especially the women that were a part of this, I feel like there's something inside of each person, like a natural gut instinct that they know when something's not right. But it seems like just because there were prophets, they would believe everything that the prophet said because they spoke directly to God. Mm-hmm. I feel like it should have been something inside of them where it's like, this is wrong.
You're speaking as an actualized adult who is okay with not having all the answers. That's not what a healthy adult says. When you're speaking to people, one, at the beginning of the turn of the century, when we still don't have as much information as we have, and the world is still kind of a scary place. And yes, we can have our eyes open to more and more information we learn about the world and say, wow, it's overwhelming. But you then become more and more familiar with it. Your threshold with the discomfort arises, and science is also rising up since the last 80, 90 years ago when my grandparents were born. And so to repeat what I said earlier, a lot of people, religion has nothing to do with their own divine connection with their higher power or spirituality. It's, can they get the immediate buzz of believing that they're special, that they're God's chosen people, and that they get all the perks in heaven if they live double down this way? And a lot of people can say, oh, something's not right, but when Jesus comes again, he'll make it right. Or when Rulon comes back, he'll make it right. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this is not rational, let alone logical. But when you have invested that far into a narrative that you have dedicated your whole life, all your money, your family, time, and your resources into this dream that tells you that you are special. Mm-hmm. Most people will do anything they can to not let that story go. That they will do all sorts of mental gymnastics and even, frankly, double down deeper. And that's when my father blew the whistle on child abuse and everything. We all thought it was going to fall apart.
And it didn't. Not. Did you see the Netflix documentary, Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey? Because that's what it reminds me of. It's the same thing.
It's the same. The Rulon Allred and Rulon Jeffs. Warren Jeffs' father was also named Rulon. Rulon and Rulon were contemporaries, and they were at Short Creek together before my grandfather split away. But Rulon married Warren's aunt. My grandfather married Warren's aunt. So the Allreds and the Jeffs do have history interwoven together. And so, again, people will put themselves through so much abuse, gaslighting, whatever they can, just to hold on to this story that I am special. And learning the hard way, once you truly let go and see just how insignificant you are, it's actually very liberating. When you say, I don't have to hold myself to these ridiculous standards that set me up for extortion and abuse to hold on to the story that I'm special. But that's the trade-off. You get to go to bed at night knowing, say, but at least when I go to heaven, I will get to be a God. And that is what the Mormon philosophy promises.
Okay, so that's, I was going to ask, was there, because I know you mentioned that you used to play Nintendo, so I was going to ask, was there like not any TVs around where
some houses had no TVs? Some houses had no TVs, but my home had TV, because here's why. Quite a few houses had no TVs, it just wasn't allowed. But my mother and her sisters did not grow up in polygamy. My mother was 16 when my grandmother and grandfather, maternal grandfather divorced. And she then took my mother and her sisters, who were all teenage girls, into this polygamous cult. And so to ease that transition, my grandmother couldn't just tell her daughters, oh, you can't like David Cassidy anymore, or the Turtles and all the boy bands of the 70s, right? It's like, well, I got to give something here to make my girls not completely rebel against me.
Okay.
And so I was raised in a home that allowed TV, that allowed some modern music. My dad was going back to school at that time. He became a history teacher in Missoula, Montana. And so he was teaching a lot of kids who were not of the same belief. And so that allowed him to slowly open up his world as well. And so, yeah, we were pretty assimilated, but this is where the Allred group is different from most other religious groups, and why my grandfather Reuben was assassinated. He knew how to make money. A lot of these other groups are like, no, dress like Little House on the Prairie, stay behind the borders of the confine, chain link fence and all. Don't go out into the real world. We're going to live an agrarian lifestyle. But my grandfather was like, nope, dress like normal people, go have real jobs, bring all that money back.
Okay.
And so in the 70s, Reuben Allred and the AUB was the largest and wealthiest polygamous faction in the entire country. And that's why he was assassinated, because Ervil LeBaron wanted my grandfather's money. And he said, all right, God told me that you're now my disciple and you need to give all your money to me. And my grandfather said, yeah, no, that's not happening. So Ervil LeBaron sent his youngest wife and murdered my grandfather.
He couldn't do it himself. Okay. Did you get you think you got your work ethic from your father? Because I know he built like 1,000 houses. Like that was amazing.
Yeah, my father, bless his heart. I lost him last summer, but he was definitely a Renaissance man. I lost him to Alzheimer's, and he was a brilliant man. But to your point, that man knew how to work, and he could do anything. Whether it was building houses, playing in a band, teaching, speaking, drawing, that man could do so many things. And that's who, and a couple of years ago, before I retired from basketball, I remember I was doing an interview and someone asked me, so what did you learn to be as cerebral as you are as a basketball player? Knowing that if my shot isn't falling that night, how am I going to still be valuable on the court and contribute? And I wanted to first say, well, my high school coach told me this and that, but then it hit me in that moment, just said, oh, I guess I'm just a kid trying to be like his dad. That he knew how to do so many things, and being cerebral and having a balance of skills is what the game of life is all about.
Because you went through a lot. Go ahead. I still got 1,000 questions about Goldenie.
So when your dad found out about the child abuse, was this was he totally shocked? Didn't see any of this coming at all?
Crushed him. It blindsided him completely. My father was the truest disciple to Reuben. My father was the scriptorian, the theologian, the doctrinaire. He had a photographic memory that he spent the most time with Reuben Allred, his father, because my father would tell you that he just was the middle child of 48, but he was old enough to have a relationship in the middle of all those kids. And so my father would tag along with Reuben and sit in the back
48
seat.
Kids.
Yeah. And so my father would go on Reuben to all these road trips. That Reuben had his wives scattered all over the Intermountain West, from Nevada, Montana, Idaho, Utah, Arizona, because to avoid polygamy laws.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't be arrested again, because he was arrested in the 40s for practicing polygamy. And so my father would sit in the back seat and all hundreds of hours with his father, but Reuben would usually have people in the front seat, but he'd be proselytizing and sharing with them his version of Mormonism. And so my father was just a sponge and took it all in. And so he understood Reuben's approach to it, but then photographic memory, he was a guy that could just read scriptures and just would tell you right off the bat what it was. And because he was that sharp, his uncle Owen, who then was the prophet after my grandfather was assassinated, took my father in as his right-hand man. Again, he was the doctrinaire. And so my father was all in. He was the truest believer of anyone there. And so, but when you are that staunch of a believer, the fall is hard, because you believe it's perfect. And he had to believe it was all true for him to dedicate his life and his time and his labor and all the houses he built. He needed to believe it was 100% true. And so therefore his heart was broken even more and the sense of betrayal was there. And knowing that his father actually knew about some of the abuse that some of his quote apostles were doing. And Rulon learned about, I think he started to learn about it a couple months before he was killed. So, I mean, it's been a question that sat with me for a long time. This is well before cell phones and everything. How did the 16-year-old girl drive up from Mexico and shoot my grandfather in his office when he was always traveling all throughout the Intermountain West, seeing his wives? How does she know exactly where he was going to be? So there's sometimes a feeling that there was some inside work there to help Rulon get taken out.
Definitely. Okay, I think this would be the last question about the
Go ahead.
The church.
Yeah. What was the biggest lesson you learned from growing up in the LDS? Is it LDS?
Yeah, FLDS, LDS exchange, LDS from the Mormon Church, the fundamentalist version of that.
Let me interject for a second. But when I was a kid, I used to see commercials about the LDS, and they sent me, and I wrote them in, or I did something called the number, and they sent me a free Bible, and I was very happy. Yeah,
that's what they do. Those 80s
they
commercials
did.
were great. Yeah, about family and everything. Yeah, it was awesome. What's one thing, a lesson I learned? Coming from such a dogmatic, constricted world. I could go through so many things, but I would say that we humans are worthy of love naturally as we are.
Okay.
Rather than, the world I grew up in, that when we're born, we're basically whatever, we have to go earn and do things.
Yeah.
And so just as we are deserving of love. And I appreciate, at the time, obviously it sucks, but coming from such an extreme context definitely has given me a unique lens on the world that allows me to move into a space in the middle of being able to be open-hearted enough to see and understand why people need to hold on to their stories or their comfort zones. And why it's so hard for people to let go of those comfort zones, even if they're no longer serving them, because life is scary. It is. The world is like, as we get older, you guys learn this. No one really knows what they're doing.
No.
Nobody does.
Especially parents. They always say, we don't know what we're doing. We just go on day by day.
Yeah. And a lot of people, that terrifies them. They think that, hey, did I knock something? Okay. That they want the stability of knowing that everything's going to be okay. And
I get that.
Yeah. And I can judge them or shame people for being childish and holding on to things, or I can actually sit with them and help them work through, because the two root fears that drive us are abandonment or entrapment. And most people are usually afraid of abandonment, that they won't belong somewhere. So they will compromise themselves and their truest desires to belong somewhere. And I understand that.
Me too.
Okay.
I do.
I have one last question. So you said you're not religious anymore. So how does one denounce Mormonism?
How does one denounce Mormonism?
Yeah, how do you get out of that? Is it something you have to get out of?
Yeah, I mean, we have to go into hiding. The FBI came and got us out of our home. But one denounce Mormonism. I would say I'm a very spiritual person, but you have to go through and do the work of understanding. Just because someone has their interpretation of what God is, doesn't mean that is what God is. And just because they were wrong, doesn't mean I'm going to move into hubris and say, well, there is no God because someone told me what God is and they were wrong. So therefore it's all ridiculous. And so just as it's arrogant to think that we can put God inside of a box, I also think it's arrogant for the other extreme, the atheist, to see that there is no God at all.
Yeah.
I don't think our brains can even begin to grasp the vastness of the universe and what's going on here. And so for us, when we try to, we set ourselves up like a Greek comedy of just recreating these ridiculous scenarios as we keep trying to convince ourselves that we have absolute understanding, and we don't.
That's true.
So to denounce Mormonism, it just takes the work of really discerning, okay, what was someone's opinion versus what is truth. And most of it is just opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I ask myself a question every day, as is, God, if you exist, help me to know the things about you that you would want me to know.
That's good. That's
and
good.
It opens up an ongoing dialogue. And I don't think I will ever truly be able to grasp what it is, but at least I am okay in that gray area when most people want to be in the black and white.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Okay. Now
that's how you denounce Mormonism.
Now some basketball questions. And the first question is the title, Longshot. Because I Googled it to get the official definition. And it says a venture or a guess that has only the slightest chance of succeeding or being accurate. So why did you name the book Longshot? And is it also a play on words like a long shot in basketball as well?
Yeah.
See?
It's a double entendre. Yeah.
I'm smart.
You're smart. I actually didn't get to choose my title. Most publishers choose your title. My original title was The Thoughts and Tangents Inside the Mind of a obsessively compulsive but brilliantly handsome deaf kid.
That's a long title.
I knew it wasn't going to be chosen, but when I was writing my book, I actually started writing Longshot for catharsis. When my first year I was playing over in France professionally, I was really frustrated with how everything was going.
Mm-hmm.
And so just for my own internal therapy, before Zoom calls with therapists, I just started writing down my life stories as a history and English major in college. But I also was a writer before I started playing basketball. My parents encouraged me to read and write to express myself. And so I was that kid in elementary winning the poetry and the writing awards when it wasn't cool to do so back in Cold War era 1980s, right?
No, I was going to ask you if it was cathartic for you to write it.
It was. And so I had no intention of it ever being published. It was just for me and thinking maybe my future kids might want to know some of the things I've been through. And so when I was called up to Cleveland in 2008, HarperCollins heard my story on NPR. And they reached out to my agent and said, hey, we'd love to get a ghostwriter out to get the story. And my agent said, no, Lance is a writer. Here you go. So we gave him over 800 pages and they axed it down to 250.
800 pages is a long book. But no, you were actually, which is very rare, a very smart job. He's really... it's in the book, Nate. I'm not making this up.
I thought you was about to say something else.
No, because one incident where the teacher didn't think he actually wrote a paper and he did write the paper. So
she tried to cite me for plagiarism because she thought there's no way
because it was that good.
It was that good, yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of in high school, do you still talk to those two guys? I forgot their names that played the trick on you with the presentation.
That was
the
so
NBA.com. That link.
Oh yeah, Jared and Greg. Oh yeah, they're still my friends.
I screamed. I really screamed because I was like, how did they even do it?
But that's who I am. And that's why when I was meeting you guys at the conference last month, I loved that conference because those are my best friends. Again, I was a Dungeons and Dragons kid, a Nintendo kid, a writer who just happened to play basketball as a new way to blend in, leaving polygamy and at a new school, not having any friends. I grew so much. Basketball came later, but at my heart, I'm an IT nerd. I love to be able to do all this kind of thing.
Good.
So that convention in Florida, I'm speaking everybody's language. We're talking World of Warcraft on the side and everything. It was great. And so my friends were on the ground floor right before, the .com boom of the late 90s. We were in high school from 96 to 99.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are now taking computer programming classes in this wild new frontier that they were the friends that were hacking into the computers terminals to change grades and whatnot. But they actually found out that one of the teachers was having an illicit affair with one of the students.
Oh my God.
And so they actually saved the day, like in a real Encyclopedia Brown kind of way. So those kind of stories. Wow. And so for them to just make up some pornographic site on the fly in my computer programming class and try to set me up. That's just stuff that they would do. But we're still friends to this day.
That's
That was
good.
hilarious.
Are you still in contact with your high school coach, Rip?
Oh yeah, Coach Rupp. Coach Rupp.
He was like the best coach you had.
The best coach. He's actually the associate head coach at Oregon State.
Mm.
And so he's doing his thing, and we'll always be bonded. But it was just a different type of mentorship. Again, he wasn't like a lovey-dovey, effusive type of person. But I can see him and I can hug him. But he's not the type of guy that goes out of his way to communicate. But he's intense like that, and I'm always so grateful for him. Like, he really, there's things that he taught me in high school. I think I did articulate in the book that they didn't really translate to the college game, because the college game is so congested. There's no illegal defense, and so defense can pack it in.
Mm-hmm.
But he was best friends with Karl Malone. And so he started teaching me Karl Malone stuff of how to catch in the post, but turn and face up so you can see the whole floor, and learn to go right or left hand, and learn to score more with your left hand than your right hand, even though I'm right-handed. Coach Rupp was telling me and challenging me to do all those things. That when it got to the pro level and I started playing in the minor leagues in the NBA, which you can only be in the defensive key for 3 seconds as a defender before you have to clear out, which opens up the driving lanes. That's why there's so much more scoring at the pro level than at college. And I'm like, oh, wow, Coach Rupp prepared me for all of this. Suddenly, it's this whole new world opening up before me to go and do what I do and show my versatility. And so I will always be indebted to Coach Rupp.
That's great. And talk a little bit about, since you mentioned the minor league, I think they call it the D League now because it's the developmental.
It's a G League. It was the NBA Development League, but now it's the Gatorade League, the G League.
Oh, okay. So talk about that journey and all the hardships there and playing overseas, because then I want to ask you, do you think the D League actually helps or hurt players as well as overseas? Do it help or hurt players?
Oh, man, there's so much that goes into
it. Was a lot.
Yeah. So just so people understand context here, the average age of an NBA rookie is 20, and I was 27 when I made the NBA. Ooh. So that's 7 years of heartbreak and disappointment and setbacks and politics. And a lot of people get like really activated when I tell them the NBA is like any corporate job. When there's that much money involved, of course it's political. Of course, it's who you know, who your agent is. Is your agent former teammates with the general manager of this team? And a lot of people get really upset. I'm like, but I'm sorry. The truth is, this is what it is. But so many people get so passionate about their sports teams, and they buy the jerseys and buy everything. They want to believe it's pure merit. And I understand that, because life is political. And people deal with corporate politics all the time. They don't want to have to see it on the TV screen too. They want to be able to detach from that and just, relax and zone out. Overseas is nasty, because when you sign a contract overseas, it doesn't really mean anything. Those are guidelines, because you're not a citizen of that country. What you on your contract? If you add up the money I'm owed from around the world, it's about $900,000 from teams that never paid. So it's a silly business. And like any market, you can look at the top 1% of those NBA players and think that everyone's making bank.
They're not.
They're really not. But when someone signs a $50 million contract, that's stupid money. But to be put in context, you're getting taxed more than 50% of that, because every county and city, state you play in on the road is also going to tax you.
Oh, see, I didn't know that.
And then you're paying agent fees on top of that too. So yeah, Steph Curry's making 50 million a year, but after everything's all said and done, it's about 20 million. Granted, he's going to be just fine with $20 million. But just to give people context, now that's still stupid money.
Yeah.
But then the level below that, someone's making, as a mid-level player, $5 million a year. Again, that's going to be $2 to $2.5 million they're going to get. And with inflation and things being what they are now, you can spend $2 million very quickly. It doesn't go as far as we think it's going to go unless you have perfect 20/20 vision. You know exactly how it's going. But when you finally get that first big paycheck, you're like, I need to reward myself for all the BS. And then all the corporate stuff starts kicking in. You get disenchanted and you're like, well, I'm going to keep splurging on myself to make it worthwhile. And that's why athletes burn through their money so quickly.
And go broke, especially with football players.
Yes, absolutely. And NFL has less contractual guarantees.
Yeah, they don't get yeah.
Yeah,
That's our favorite sport. So I know a lot about
yeah,
that.
it's brutal. It's
It is.
nasty. It is. And so again, I'm not asking for a pity card or a sympathy card as far as players and their contractual and their salaries and everything. I'm just saying, okay, let's put it in the context that it's not as absurd as we truly think it is.
Mm-hmm.
But all that being said, again, we're only talking like the top 10% of players in the NBA making that kind of money.
Yeah.
And then going overseas, where one, are you going to get paid? That's the number one question.
Yeah,
Does
because
this
one
team
time you
actually?
didn't get paid.
Oh yeah, I get. There's lots of teams, even after the NBA experience, that didn't pay me, and just trying to get the money is always the most difficult part. But then, do they treat you well? Do you have a good facility? Do you have a clean facility? Do you have a good basketball gym? Do you have towels to wipe your hands on? Do you have air conditioning in that gym? Just basic things like that. Most of them do not. And so you're playing basketball and training in late summer and the fall, getting ready for the season, and you got cockroaches, you got sweaty gyms. It's
Not
just, yeah,
cockroaches.
it's not as glamorous as people would expect it to be. And it's a gritty, I did it for 10 years, and it's a gritty
That's
lifestyle.
terrible. You went through a lot. You really did. I felt your
I've seen
pain
things.
while reading the book. I felt your pain.
And go to your question about the development league.
Yeah.
I have so much affection for the NBA development league that my generation, I joined the NBA development league in its second season. And guess what? No one had any idea what they were doing. Even the front office administration for the NBA development league. The NBA just said, all right, here's your budget, make it work. Nobody
Which was
had any idea
nothing.
what was going on. So we were all just blazing a trail as pioneers, players, coaches, team owners. Some teams at that time were already owned by NBA teams. My team, the Idaho Stampede, was independent. So we still had private ownership, but we were affiliated with the Utah Jazz. And so again, you got some teams that are owned by NBA teams. You got some teams that are private entities. It's like, what's going on here? And so I have been privileged to be able to reconnect with some of the administration people, the former presidents and whatnot. When I travel my speaking engagements, I'll catch up with them, we'll grab a lunch. And we just get really emotional because we were all just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, figuring it
And
out.
we bonded in a way that it was so much politics from thinking having this NBA overlord team. And one road trip for that team is more than the budget of the entire D Leagues team for that season.
What? Yeah, he said
And
that.
so we're just scrapping away. But what it taught me about entrepreneurship, learning to do radio interviews, TV interviews, things that allowed me to transition out of basketball and make more money than I did as a basketball player. Development League taught me that. Things that people thought was a waste of time. But the opportunity it gave us to play in America for not a lot of money at the time. Nowadays, players are getting like major signing bonuses, like 6 figures to play in the NBA Development League. When I was there, a max contract, $25,000
a year. A year
to sign on. Oh, a year.
That's but it was since you were there at the cusp of the D League, you did win the first trophy for Horse. So congrats.
Trophy, yes,
that's history. So congrats for that.
Yeah, I was a magician.
But also, are you still friends with Randy Livingston?
I love Randy so much.
Because it seemed like y'all came really buddies, and then when y'all went to New Orleans and you experienced that culture, you really liked it. So I just was wondering, were y'all still friends?
I am fascinated with culture. I love culture even in its shortcomings, because again, playing basketball on every continent, being able to see things that transcend culture, like the human heart, but also archetypes. And when I say archetypes, you know, the king, the magician, the lover, the warrior, the coach, the teacher, the victim, the child, saboteur, prostitute, those are archetypes that we humans portray. And that's what the Greek myths are about, the archetypes within our psyche, showing how we humans self-sabotage and clash and collide with each other, which is just an internal war with ourselves. But seeing how these transcend cultures, I'm fascinated with, but also being able to see the beautiful nuances of these cultures, Japan, all the way down then to New Orleans, being able to really dive down deep into them. And who knew that a deaf polygamous kid like me that lived in a xenophobic society that was us against the world in the backwoods of Montana, that basketball would take me all around the world to teach me these skills that allow me to now pretty much have the threshold of comfort to go into any culture, into any corporate boardroom, and have conversations with people that I am not intimidated by anybody. But that's what the basketball allowed me to do. And I have so much gratitude towards it.
Okay. I have like 3 more NBA questions. What's the first, because I know people ask you this all the time. What's the first question they ask you about the NBA?
Oh, did you play with LeBron?
How was it playing with LeBron? And I'm only asking because that's my favorite player, not because.
Oh my goodness.
No, at the time when LeBron and I were teammates, I was 27, he was 24. This is a guy who came out of high school without any real parental guidance. Never knew his father. His mother was in and out of his life. He basically slept on his friend's sofas for most of his childhood.
Yeah.
So coming out of high school with all that money and fame thrown his way, for him to handle it and deliver and live up to the hype that he had is remarkable. And a lot of people don't put that into context. And his 2 faux pas are the decision and the whole China thing.
Yeah.
But those are the worst things he's ever done.
Which is good because those is not like he killed nobody or anything like that. No. But yeah, I still like the decision, but I'm biased. So
yeah, I know you would be. But yes, physically, as a physical specimen, he in his prime was just the most absurd thing we will probably ever see as far as a physical talent.
Okay.
But there were things he would do in practice. I'm trying to guard him. All I can do is just pat him on the ass and say, God bless you. I mean, I'm not going to stop that. But
so in essence, he's better than MJ.
Yeah, more impressive than that is his intellectual intelligence.
Yes, basketball IQ.
His IQ is off the charts. Not just as a basketball player, but he's one of the top 5 most intelligent people I've ever met.
Oh wow, that's
but
great.
Comparing LeBron to MJ is not. It doesn't fit.
It doesn't, and I tell people that all the time. Sidebar: I never watched MJ play. I started in the AI era, so I didn't even see. I can't even compare, and I refuse to look at his highlights because I don't care. But I think they were 2 different type of players.
There were 2 different types of players, but we need to talk about context here. You started with AI. AI changed the game that the NBA changed the rules from no hand check. Now, here's why I'm going to say MJ is the greatest of all time.
No.
We have to. Context.
Okay. Go. I'm listening.
When MJ was playing, he wasn't the biggest guy. He was maybe 6'6", but like maybe 220, maybe 220. But he was getting beat up every single night because the NBA did not call fouls on the hand check or the elbow check. When Iverson started playing, you can no longer touch a guy with your hand if he has the ball. That allowed the lanes to open up because Iverson was so tiny that people were throwing him around, but the NBA understood fans want to see scoring. And so MJ could get elbowed, could get hand checked by guys much stronger than them. Patrick Ewing and Anthony Mason wanted to beat him up. And he took those hits from Bill Laimbeer, and he still averaged 52% from the field, getting his ass kicked every single night. And
he used to have to play what they call the bad boy Pistons. He had to play
the
them,
Pistons,
right?
Bill Lambert
Yeah.
and the Pistons.
Yeah.
They abused him. It is such a different game.
And
If you
he-
scored in the 90s, if you scored 100 points, that was a high scoring game because the defense was allowed to be so much more physical, to hand check you, to bow you, to throw you around. You can't do that anymore because it opens up the lanes. People want to see high scoring. In the 90s,
That's
you
true.
could just throw an elbow at somebody and the ref would let it slide. And you're not going to let someone get around you. And so taking into that, but also the way Jordan made basketball a global sport. Bird and Magic Johnson were important into making basketball a recognized American game. When Bird and Magic were playing, when they started, the NBA were tape delayed screenings on TV. They weren't live.
Okay.
So they were huge into making America want to see it live. Jordan took that and made it a global phenomenon. That Nike brand in him, the reason why basketball is a global game now and that market for players to play overseas is because of Michael Jordan. The other clubs and people around the world realize, hey, people like basketball, let's start up a club.
Yeah.
And going 6-0 in NBA championship series, untouched. He had ice cold killer in his veins. I say this just because I'm saying this does not diminish what LeBron or Kobe have accomplished. But Kobe had the no hand check and he only shot 43% from the field. LeBron had the hand check. No, Jordan had the hand check, shot 52% from the field. These are important things to put into context.
Yeah, no, I never heard it explained like that. That makes sense.
Doesn't diminish what Kobe and LeBron have done.
No,
and I tell people, we don't necessarily have to
not.
compare people. Just appreciate a master at work when you see
Oh,
it.
I've learned to walk away from those comparison conversations because I used to get mad. So I just walk away.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts on the current state of the NBA and who is your favorite player if you have one, or favorite big, let's say?
After living in the other side of the curtain of Oz and seeing the corporate underbelly of what it is, I don't have a favorite team. It's just, these are just like, Costco versus Walmart, in my opinion.
Do you still watch though?
I like to watch a good basketball game. I want to see a good game. So I just want to see players doing well at their craft, making it interesting. One player, my two favorite probably, it might be Damian Lillard and Steph Curry at the moment.
Damian is my number two, but I like
my
Steph.
favorite player.
And they're both great human beings. Damian and I are both.
She switched favorite players every month, so don't take.
What do you mean? Isn't that
you said
Lillard?
But last month we got in an argument because you said the other guy was your favorite player. The guy who came from Thunder and he's on the Lakers now, the one who always do the turnovers. What's his name?
I don't know who that is.
Now? Come from where?
I don't know who she's
the one who
about.
used to play with Kevin Durant at the Rockets.
Oh, Westbrook.
Westbrook
I
was
like him,
player.
but he's not my favorite player. But
she switch every month.
Anyway,
the reason why Steph Curry is up there for me, whenever you have someone that can transcend an industry.
Yeah, that's insane. He's insane.
The way he has changed the game, again, that's the way Jordan changed the game. Kobe and LeBron did not change the game of basketball. They simply stepped into a system and excelled at it in major brilliance.
Okay.
And that is hard to do. But you take it a step further and you make the industry change and adapt to you is a completely next level thing. Jordan and Steph Curry were able to do that.
Yeah, Steph just seemed like a good, genuine person.
I swear, you can't tell if somebody genuine just because they good on the basketball court.
I'm saying he just looked like I will believe anything he says.
He's consistent. He's a consistent human being, and Damian Lillard is as well.
I don't know if Ice Cube still does this, but what did you think about the Big Three? Yeah,
the Big Three basketball tournament thing.
Yeah, I think it was a league.
I know that's going on and people are still doing it, but for me, it was, I gave 20 years of my life to basketball, and I'm now going to honor it and release it and say thank you and allow myself to move on into other chapters of my life.
And that's good that you say that, because that's a nice segue to my next category of questions. So I watched your TED Talk. Would you do another one? And what have you been up to post NBA? And what's next?
So what I've been doing, well, I was going through a divorce back in 2015, and my son was 15 months old.
15 months.
So that's why I retired
like
from basketball.
babies.
I didn't want to be away from my son.
Simon, right?
Simon.
See, I do my research.
So I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, but since I was with the Cavaliers, since that time, schools have always been reaching out to me, asking me to come speak to their students.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, I hear this is rumor you can get paid for public speaking. Let's try it out. So I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I started responding to the schools, telling them I come speak. Sometimes they're like, all right, I'll come speak for $200, $500. Now it's $1,000. Now it's $2,500 for schools. But then you start speaking then at Rotary clubs, Kiwanis clubs, chambers of commerces, and then you start taking a $500 paycheck, and then $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 now. That it's just, you take your time to hone your craft and being able to take my stories. But my grandfather's gift of gab. I mean, if you can convince 7 women to marry you and 7,000 people to give you all your money, you obviously have the gift of gab.
Very charming.
So that's in my DNA. And it's like, okay, but can I do it in an ethical way and not try to swindle money out of people? And instead, can I help them and take my life experiences and help them to self-actualize themselves and be able to define for themselves their own metrics of success? And the world I came from, we talked about this polygamous world where everything was so rigid and dogmatic, and you're measuring your self-worth depending on all these outcomes and things you've done. But anyone who knows you've lived life, there's so many things that have to go your way for you to have your dreams come true. But there's so many, everyone has their own agendas. And so to think that we can just will life to bend our way, and if it doesn't, that means I'm a bad person. It's like, no, that's a very childish way to view the world. And am I brave enough to step out of these outdated metrics and decide for myself what my metric of success? And for me, it's clarity. Being able to have the clarity that my worth is not attached to an outcome, nor how much money I have in my bank account. And that gives me the freedom to always be curious about life and where it's going to take me. And so while I do speaking, I've written a couple more books since that point. Own a couple of laundromats and Airbnbs for the passive cash flow, which is good because why it's nice.
Laundromats make a lot here in New York.
They
do.
They allow me to have healthy boundaries. That if I don't like an offer for a speaking engagement, when I was first started, I had to take everything, even if I didn't like the terms.
Yeah.
But it's all about diversifying that money and living within your means. It's not about going and buying that fancy sports car and everything. To learn that stuff I learned about in the NBA when I saw players spend everything. It was, okay, I have a kid to worry about now. He's my number one priority. I can't be selfish with my money, but how can I make that money pay for itself? And it's like, okay, we'll spend $30, $30,000 that I saved up and buy that laundromat. Which if you have 3 of them, that's passive income of $5,000 a month, which again, I don't have to compromise myself for other speaking engagements now. And so learning to set healthy boundaries is such an important thing as an entrepreneur, but those are things I had to learn about as a basketball player, and I have so much gratitude for it. And now developing with my nonprofit, I have a nonprofit where I coach at-risk youth who've been impacted by addiction. Family members and parents who have addiction problems, and I teach them basketball, but we're teaching them emotional intelligence skills, coping skills, because as a basketball player, I can't just have one go-to move. I have to have arsenal of moves, and coaching these kids to develop other coping skills. That if you can't meditate, or if you can't play Nintendo that day, what else are you going to do to self-soothe? And I'm doing that, developing that at a hot springs resort that has been donated to my nonprofit in Oregon. So we'll allow it to be a much more holistic experience with a basketball gym, but also weekend retreats and facilitation workshops and everything like that.
That's amazing. Okay. Oh, Nate, do you have questions? Because I have another category.
If I can get a word in edgewise, that would be great. Do you ever go back to like Utah and visit anybody there?
I am
like,
in
is the
Utah.
community? Oh, you are
the
now?
community in Montana. The people in Utah, no, I don't connect with them at all. But my grandmother, my mom's mom, and my Aunt Stacy and Uncle Hud, who still remained in polygamy because they were in a polygamous marriage, they couldn't just up and leave and leave the second wife who had given them kids. But all their kids are grown up now, moved on. But the man that my father blew the whistle on for child abuse, he actually maneuvered his way and became the head of the Allred group. And once that happened, a lot of all of my mom's sisters were like, you know what? No, we could bury our head in the sand, but this is not okay. So they actually broke away themselves. And a lot of people after that happened, actually, quite a few of my father's siblings reached out to my father and did their best to reconcile with him.
That's good.
Sorry, we do not believe you, but it took 25 years.
Yeah.
But by the time my father received it, he didn't need it anymore. He didn't need for them to say, I'm sorry or whatever. But it was just a nice thing to have at the end. And at his funeral last year, a lot of his siblings showed up to honor him, and we did not expect that.
That's good.
That is good, because in some of these cults, the family members just stop, like cut them off, like it was.
Because you have to.
Yeah.
How is Court? You talk a lot about
Court. He's doing
like
really,
him.
He's a remarkable human being. I have remarkable siblings. All of my mom's kids are very happy and successful people, living their careers they want to live. They have freedom and autonomy, and I'm incredibly proud of all of my siblings, and it's an honor to be their younger brother. And my brother Court is a wonderful social worker therapist for autistic teens.
All right.
And you wouldn't think it, but he would never brag about it. He's actually, I don't say it in the book, but he's actually on the Aspergerian scale. But he's very high functioning. That allows him to connect well with these youth and these kids. And I've had many people at the fundraisings that I do here in Utah for private events, nonprofit events, in the social sphere. A lot of people come up to me and they say, your brother is the best in Utah. And he's very, very good. And he and I went through a lot. A lot of people don't think about it. They focus so much on the women and what they experience in polygamy.
Yeah.
But my brother and I actually, and my sisters will all admit that my parents would even admit too, they overcorrected with my sisters to make them feel empowered. That my brother and I actually probably had the most baggage from polygamy as far as our self-worth and feeling of value, that do we deserve to be loved by a woman and stuff like that, as we are. And so he and I have gone through a lot together, and we're both now 41, 43. We've actually become quite close again. I'm very proud of my brother.
That's good. That's great. Are you about to ask? Because I have three like kind of funny questions to ask him, but go ahead.
Okay, so I know in the book you mentioned that when you were younger, maybe around high school age, that you didn't talk to a lot of girls, but it wasn't because you were like thought they had cooties or whatever, but because we had high-pitched voices.
But also there was the conditioning too that women were so much more spiritual than men. And therefore they were better people than us naturally. That's stuff that I was absorbing as a kid. So I was like, well, if women are better than me, I don't want to be rejected by one, because that would be brutal. And so one, high-pitched voices made it hard for me to hear them. But I was so afraid of them reflecting to me my value, that if they didn't like me, that must mean I'm not an attractive guy. And so, learning to reconcile all that and making peace with allowing myself to be a bit softer inside as a human being, and letting my emotions be expressed and giving myself room to have those emotions has definitely helped my relationship with them.
Okay, I always thought I had a deep voice for a girl. Is my voice deep?
Yeah, you do.
You do. It's a good voice. I like it.
I don't need. No, you can agree. I don't need her to agree.
No, I like it's nice voice. I can hear it. It's pretty good. I appreciate it.
Also, you were in the chorus. So how did that go? So you must,
Can
I
you
guess
sing?
your speech therapy must have really helped, because normally deaf people can't speak that well, but you could sing.
My mother was, there were many times speech therapists were like, yeah, you don't have to send your kid here anymore. But my mom was like, no, it still heard in his voice that he has hearing loss, and I don't want people to pigeonhole my child.
Mm-hmm.
I want it undetectable. Now, I think some of it, one, was a reflection of my mother. Again, the culture we came from. My grandmothers were strict, harsh Capricorn women. Both Capricorns is the way it is. No time for room feelings. Don't embarrass us. Don't draw attention on yourself. Don't ever take more than you give. All that stuff. And I think there was part of my mom that very Princess Diana British proper that's like, I don't want anything in my home to look bad or flawed, because there was so many eyes on my parents in the culture and the cult that we were growing up in, that I think my mom wanted everything to be perfect. And she's making a lot of peace and reconciling with that, and doing a lot. She's done a lot of work with herself. I'm incredibly proud of my mother. But the way we were raised, there was no room to look less than perfect. And so I think that was part of my mom. One, not only did she not want people to limit me, but I think part of it too was her own internalization of saying, if I have a less than perfect family, it means that God isn't blessing us.
Oh, okay. That's
And
insightful.
so on one hand, it's pretty hard to grow up that way, but because of it, I sound the way I do and I operate the way I do. So I have gratitude for that double-edged sword of my mother just hammering it home till I was 16, twice a week, to make sure no one can ever tell that I have a hearing loss. And again, it's you can't win, because you're gonna talk like a that person like us on the back of mouth. And that's how I used to talk. And you can talk like this, and everyone thinks you're stupid.
No,
Or you can talk like this, and everyone thinks you're an asshole when you don't respond to them. So either way, you can't win.
When they told me she met you and we were gonna have you on the podcast, my first thought was, how? And I'm like, he's not gonna hear us. Like you could tell I don't run into
headphones and Zoom are amazing. Yeah, if it was over a phone call, it wouldn't be fun. But Zoom allows me to read your lips, and we get the job done.
And I'm like, how is that gonna happen? Okay, so here's my funny question. First of all, and this wasn't on the list. This is just because I see it on your arm. What is your tattoo? It looks interesting.
I got my tattoo last summer when I scattered my father's ashes in England. You can't really see it, but this is a raven taking up his ashes to Elysium. And I scattered his ashes at Holy Island. It's upside down. I'm going to do my best, but I can't really do it. It's hard. But at Holy Island and Lindisfarne, where the Vikings first landed in England, my father and I always wanted to visit there. He was a history teacher. And so that's where I went and scattered his ashes. And then we had the raven that followed me around England those 3 weeks as I was scattering his ashes. Wow. And so I saw a talented kid in England who saw one of my posts about my dad. He's like, oh, I have an idea for a tattoo if you're interested. And he's super talented kid, did a great job. Wow. I never considered myself a tattoo guy, but at the moment it just felt like the right thing to do. And I don't have any regrets about it. It's just there now. It's a part of me. That's cool. And the fact that it's meaningful is great, because some of these people tattoos is just trash.
They just get them just because.
So I actually have some of my father's ashes actually embedded in the ash spots.
For real?
So you can have, some of his ashes are in there.
That's amazing.
That's cool.
And so, it has deep meaning, and it takes me back to that last trip I took with my dad and his ashes. And it was a life-changing trip, and the tattoo felt appropriate. That's great. Okay, let's talk about these Fig Newtons. Because I was like, Black people eat Fig Newtons because we grew up eating Fig Newtons. So I'm like, who are these people? So do you still eat those? Oh, I love Fig Newtons, but it was just a funny joke because none of my Black teammates at the time on the D League wanted to eat the Fig Newtons. That was shocking because I screamed. I'm like, I eat Fig Newtons. It was just, they always, my teammates would always go blow their money at the clubs, but I would always go to Costco with my road money and get all the bulk stuff. And then they'd come and raid my room and steal the food because they didn't have any money. They spent it on the girls the night before. But I learned that right, none of them like Fig Newtons, so I'm going to keep buying Fig Newtons, and that it's safe. They won't come and try to eat them. So it was self-preservation, really.
That's funny. Did you see the movie Longshot with Charlize Theron and Seth Rogen?
No.
It's a funny movie, but it was about because
saw they took the title. I'm like, well, I mean, if this book is ever made into a movie, we'll have to call it something different.
No, it's different though. It's not about sports. It's because Seth Rogen, I guess, isn't traditionally attractive.
It's like a covert operations kind of
movie.
And
he's
kind of like a funny slapstick comedy.
Yeah, he ends up with her, but nobody thinks he has a chance. So that's what it's kind of about.
Okay.
And this last question, you don't have to answer. I just thought it was funny. So for our female audience, they probably want to know if you're spoken for or not. Are you single or no?
I would say I'm single. I have a girl that I've recently started talking to, but she's been pretty clear about, hey, I don't think I'm ready for anything serious. I'm like, okay, but I like spending time with you. So, I mean, and that kind of works with my life at the moment, as far as being a single dad and all these other things that I have going on. Maybe in a year or two, my things might slow down, but at the moment, I'm pretty spoken for as far as my son and this hot springs vision with the nonprofit. That takes up most of my time. And for a lot of women I've dated in the past, they're drawn to the momentum that I'm always going into and building and trying to do things. They're drawn to that, but then eventually resent it.
Yeah, because it's too much time away from them, maybe.
Too much time, but then I'm not stopping and suddenly making them the first priority. It's like, not that I don't care about you, but the life I'm trying to live is a life of service for other people. And
that's good.
It really is.
That's admirable.
It doesn't get to be about me. And therefore, it doesn't get to be about someone else's need to feel completed in a relationship. It will have to be someone that is very comfortable in who they are and where they're going, and if they can, our lives can fit together. So I don't know how it's going to look.
Okay, cool.
Your son, was he born with hearing loss?
No, my hearing loss is not a genetic thing. It's that RH thing with the blood type thing.
Okay, yeah.
And so it was not a genetic issue, and so no, he's fine. But he's his mom's half Tongan. She was a professional volleyball player. And so he'll have all the athleticism I never had. And he's a big dude. He turns 9 next month. But
9?
He's like 5'4" right now. So he's a big boy.
You're pretty tall too. How tall are you? Because I remember that was the first thing I noticed about you, that you were really tall.
It wasn't my looks. It was my height. Okay, fine. 6'11".
I would have noticed the looks, but I digress. So I have one last question. So normally on our podcast, we talk about like scandals within sports, like everything off the court, not really stats or what happened in the game last night. So if you have an opinion about this, I would like to know. So what do you think about the Brittany Griner situation? Have you been following it?
Well, that poor girl, I feel so bad for her. It's brutal. Obviously, she's a political pawn right now.
Yeah.
And part of me is also like, Brittany, sweetie, you can buy cartridges for everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like, Brittany, this isn't your first rodeo.
It's not, because she goes there a lot. So You've
been playing for many, many years now. That you read the political environment, read the temperature, and say, okay, do I want to give them anything to have on me? And I learned as I go into any country, Venezuela or Qatar or whatever, all these places I've been, don't give them any ammunition. I don't even take Tylenol. Don't take anything with you. That's just something you learn to do as a professional athlete if you're going to try to move between borders as fluidly as you need to. And so I'm heartbroken for it, but I'm also like, Brittany, we know better. Yeah. And so I hope she gets back safe. I mean, my thoughts are with her, and I think they're going to figure it out. The U.S. will have to give up some prisoners to swap, and that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah. I read that she filed an appeal today.
It's not going to make a difference.
Yeah, it's not in Russia. They don't like us.
Yeah, when you're not a citizen of that country, it's like, what? No, that's not.
It's not the USA, okay?
No.
It's not.
But again, that's kind of rich coming from me saying, okay, well, Black people, obviously, it works out well for them in the American justice system. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work out that well for them in America. It's definitely not going to work out better for them in Russia.
No.
And so I have complete compassion for that issue as well. I haven't been in enough situations overseas when police officers would pull me over and frisk me and whatnot and take my money that I felt really unnerved and isolated and violated. And I had a choice to say, oh, well, yeah, I got over it. Everyone else can get over it. Or I can say, wow, shit, that's a shitty experience.
Yeah.
But at least I wasn't even a citizen of this country. I can't even imagine being a citizen of a country and having that happen to me, like so many Black and other minority people have to go through in America. And it's just shitty. And if we're claiming to be the best country in the world, which frankly we're not anymore, we better live up to that kind of talk, and we don't.
No, we don't. No, we do not. Anyway, so let's end on that note. Tell everybody how they can reach you, or your Instagram, things like that. Oh, your nonprofit name.
Yeah. My nonprofit is called Courage and Grit. And my social handles, it's just my full name, Lance Allred, LanceAllred, 41. Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. You can find me there. Yeah. So I appreciate this opportunity. I've enjoyed visiting with you, sisters.
Thank you. I did too. It was a good time.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the research, and we actually have fun conversations. Normally, I don't get that kind of respect leading up to an interview. So I appreciate that you guys took the time.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. And I wish you guys the best of luck. Keep at it. Perseverance with everything. I mean, I think you guys have the right dynamic that, could take a year, it could take 5 years or whatnot, but consistency is key. So keep at it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of A Picture is Worth 1,000 Words with yours truly, the Fletcher Twins. Make sure you join us every week and rate, comment, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit up our email at podcast.1000words@gmail.com with any questions or topics you'd like to hear us cover. Also, check us out on IG at the Fletcher Twins and Facebook at A Picture is Worth 1,000 Words.